Welcome to UNC Charlotte's 10th annual 3-minute thesis competition. I'm Dr. Catherine Hall-Hertel. I'm an associate dean in the graduate school. It is my pleasure to welcome you all today. Thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting our students. We really appreciate it, and I know they appreciate it too. We're going to be holding people if they come in late so that they don't distract the presenters. And so we wanted to wait and let everybody get seated before we started. But before we get going, I have some thank yous I'd like to make. First, I'd like to thank our major sponsor, Raju Mahajan from Raju Law. Thank you so much for your generous sponsorship of the event. We also have about 20 staff and administrators who served as judges in the preliminary round, and many of them are here today, so thank you all for your support. I want to call out 3 people who really supported our students in preparing for this event. Dr. Daryl Kerr, Dr. Elise Demeter, and John Howard from the creative director at Crafted, all worked with our finalists on their presentations, their slides, and really I think you'll see that quality that came from their guidance, so thank you. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't thank my team and the Reynolds Center for Graduate Life and Learning. They've worked very hard to put together a quality event, and particularly Laura Pagani has done so much to make today's event really wonderful, so thank you. So now let me tell you a little bit about the 3-minute thesis competition. It started in 2008 at the University of Queensland in Australia. And they started with 160 research students in that first competition. By the next year, it had already expanded to other universities in Australia and New Zealand. And by 2010, it had jumped the pond and it was in Europe. And so we had our first multinational competition. Today, we have over 350 universities participating in 3MT in 18 different countries. So you can see that it is quite the phenomenon. As Charlotte is now an R1 university, it's even more important that our faculty and our students learn how to talk about their research and explain its importance to the public and to funding agencies. So enter 3MT, right? This event really helps them because they have to distill their research in under 3 minutes and explain it in language suitable for a non-specialist audience. So you're going to see 11 of our students do that today. And I think you're going to be really impressed. Now, in addition to just saying thank you to all of you, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Jill Huerta. She's our Assistant Dean for the Reynolds Center, and she will introduce our judges. Jill?
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to my absolute favorite event every year, 3-minute thesis. I'm thrilled to have such a full house and have you all here to see the wonderful work that our students are doing and the wonderful way they're learning to communicate it. As Dr. Hall-Hertel explained, the point of 3MT is being able to explain your research to a non-specialist audience. And this often happens in private industry, in public organizations, where leaders in those organizations need technical details to make important decisions. And they rely on the people who work with them to be able to do that. So our judging panel today reflects that. These are all people who are leaders in organizations in our community and who need to understand technical information to do their jobs well. So I'd like to introduce our judges. Judges, if you could either stand up or at least wave so people can acknowledge you when I call you out. We have Davina Demelin, Senior Consultant of Business Technology and AI from SEI, the management consulting firm. We have have Claudio Ferri, Artistic Director and Deputy General Director at Opera Carolina. So if you want to see some opera, maybe you can score us some tickets. We have Elma Lloyd, Head of Enablement and Business Engagement for Equitable. And Elma, I see you're wearing your green because you are a Charlotte alum. So thank you for coming back. We have Scott McFarlane, Senior Staff Engineer at Lending Tree, also a Charlotte alum. We have Matteo Di Michele, AI Global Compliance and Operations, Bank of America. Thank you. We have Kirsten Rogers. She's president and founder of Proximate Learning. Proximate Learning is a workforce development firm in health and human services, and she's new to the Charlotte area. Welcome. We have Shane Taylor, instructional designer for Ally. Another Charlotte alum. Thank you for coming back. So thank you so much, judges. You're such an important part of this, and it's for people like you that we are teaching, partly, that we are teaching students these skills. Students, it's also so advantageous for you in every way to learn to do this skill. Everything from job interviews to grant proposals to job talks in academia, where you might be talking with a committee of people who are not in your narrow specialty. And as your work gets more and more technical, this skill becomes more and more important. And AI isn't going to replace you in your public speaking. Yeah. So I want to just take a minute and compliment all of you for getting to the start, for getting to the finals, and for doing just what you should be doing in graduate school, which is stretching yourself and doing things that are hard and learning new skills. Can we have a hand of applause? Excellent work taking on something that's hard. So, and I know it's hard because I've done it. It's very hard. Anybody want a power pose before we start? Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. All right. So the rules of 3MT are that they get no more than 3 minutes and 1 slide to explain their research to a general audience. They are judged by this panel of judges in 2 categories: comprehension and content, how well they explain their research, and engagement and communication, how skilled they are at communicating in a compelling way. There are prizes for this competition as follows. First place receives $1,500 and an all-expense-paid trip to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to compete in the regional round against other schools from the southeastern region. Second place receives $1,000, third place $750. And then we have a People's Choice Award winner, and you all should have received ballots, paper ballots, when you came in to vote on that. There are no cash prizes for the People's Choice Award, but major bragging rights. So keep in mind who you like the best as you're seeing these presentations, because you're all going to vote. And I hope you all brought your cheering squads. Okay, so without further ado, we will get our competition started.
Hello everyone. Let's imagine you are visiting this beautiful sunflower garden with your grandparents. And they look around and they really enjoy the vivid, colorful view of the sunflowers. But now imagine, instead of this view, what if they see something like this in the middle picture, where their vision has got blurred? Or even worse, like in this picture, where they have completely lost their central vision. So that's exactly the case for the patients who suffer from age-related macular degeneration or AMD. So AMD is a progressive eye disease where the macula or the central part of the retina keeps on damaging over time. And statistics show that every 1 person in 5 people who are aged 65 years or more than that have already been affected by AMD. As the population of the world is increasing, the number of elderly people is also increasing. And the most alarming issue is that it's been predicted by the year 2040, the number of AMD patients will reach almost 288 million. So it's high time for us to get a solution so that we can help the elderly people to lead their life happily and in a healthy way. And there are different forms of AMD, and one is called geographic atrophy, where the retinal cells of the eye keep on damaging. And about 1 million people only in the USA are already been suffering from geographic atrophy. So, to get the solution of these problems, now we can talk about AI. So, we are using AI for most of the research areas nowadays. And my domain, which is ophthalmology, where we work on the diagnosis and prognosis of different eye diseases, AI has been proven as a very remarkable solution through which we can find cost-effective and reliable solutions and also make the systems automatic. So my research is focused on developing AI models which are basically based on CNN and transformer-based architectures so that we can diagnose different forms of geographic atrophy or even predict whether the condition of geographic atrophy will progress to a worse form or not over the period of time. In this way, it will be helpful for the clinicians to take early treatment planning and to take early measurements for each and every individual of patients. And I believe it will be very helpful for the people who reside in the rural areas where there is a scarcity of ophthalmologists as well. So, my goal is to make the system automated, cost-effective, and to make a system so that it can reach the people who are actually in need and they can fight the different eye diseases and lead a healthy life. Thank you so much.
My liquids do not like your liquids. And that's okay. That's how life organizes itself. Inside your body, in your cells, your molecules like to separate like oil and water. And that's perfectly fine. But sometimes those liquids harden, they stiffen, they get all sticky. And that's the basis of diseases like ALS, Parkinson's, cancer, and many others. So think about an egg. Inside the egg, you have the egg yolk and the egg white. They're both liquids floating around inside that eggshell, but they're clearly different liquids with clearly different functions. If you shook that egg up really hard and mixed them all together, you couldn't grow that baby chicken. Similarly, inside your body, you have things called condensates. These are little liquid droplets similar to the egg yolk, and they're very important. They're very busy. So let's say your cell's really stressed. It's too hot, too cold, too salty. Your condensates can basically sequester away your important molecules and keep them safe. Condensates also act as protein factories, making more and faster proteins. Or they can also act as storage lockers. I don't need this molecule today, but I need it tomorrow. I'm just going to store it away. But the problem happens when these condensates harden. So think back to the egg. If you heat it up and you have a boiled egg, you can't grow a chicken in a boiled egg. And you can never get a raw egg back. Something similar happens with condensates, and they turn sticky. So the stiffness starts with the proteins inside of the condensates. They get all sticky, and they pull in nearby healthy proteins and make them sticky too. Over time, those condensates harden, other condensates harden, until you have a bunch of hardened condensates. We call these zombie proteins because they're no longer functional, and they spread their stickiness to all their protein friends. And so what I study is what makes these condensates, what makes one of them turn into a zombie protein, and what makes them stay healthy. What attributes about their size and shape drives what happens. I look at the DNA. In the DNA, you have 3-letter codes called codons. And these codons say, hey, start making this protein. Now make this molecule, add a little bit of this molecule, and now stop, we're finished. As you can see, there's redundancy. There's 3 different ways you can tell the cell to stop making this protein. So I look at these subtle differences. Why would you choose one stop codon over another? And how does that impact whether the cell stays healthy and liquid or turns into a zombie protein? So liquid separation drives life and is very necessary. It's what helps cells organize, adapt, and survive. But when those boundaries blur, when those liquids harden, that's when zombie proteins arrives. So my liquids, they still don't like your liquids, but that's how we like it. Thank you.
One of the most fascinating discoveries in modern science is that bulk materials behave completely different from their nano-sized counterpart. Now, when I say nano-sized, I'm talking about dimensions 1,000 times smaller than a human hair. For example, bulk gold, which we all know and love to wear, is a nice shiny gold color. But nano-sized gold actually appears red, even though they're the exact same atoms. In my lab, we use another benefit of nano-sized material, and that's its size compatibility with biological components like cells or viruses. Speaking of viruses, I'm sure we've all seen or used a COVID test strip. You swab your nose, mix it in solution, and apply it to the test. Well, what's actually happening are those viruses are splitting open, and the internal proteins are flowing through and getting bound by these unique capture points on the test line. Now, the downsides to this are that one capture point can only bind one internal protein at a time. So if someone's early in their infection, they don't have a whole lot of the virus, but still enough to spread to others, there may not be enough to give a positive signal. Another downside are that these internal proteins change when there's a new variant, which we know happens quite frequently. So they're no longer a perfect match for the capture point, again giving us false negatives. These false negatives are what contributed to millions of lives lost during COVID. So that's where my work comes in. In my lab, we develop polymer nanorods that are actually able to capture sugar. Okay, but what does sugar have to do with this? Well, the COVID virus is actually covered in sugar on all sides, all around. That's what it uses to escape our immune system, but we can use it as the detection point. The neat thing about these nanorods is that they're also reusable because we can capture the sugar and therefore the virus at a high pH and release it at a low pH. Making these nanorods is a lot like cooking. We combine certain ingredients, which are chemicals, at the right ratio to get our perfect recipe. And what we're left with are these nanorods that can capture multiple whole viruses at a time instead of just one internal protein. So we get this amplification effect, and we're able to get a positive signal sooner than previous methods. Also, the sugar around the virus doesn't change when there's a variant, so our method would work for any variant. So all in all, my research combines chemistry, nanotechnology, and engineering to develop smarter virus detection tools so we can diagnose people earlier, stop that spread, and save lives. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rishi Misra and I love bats. And for the next 3 minutes, I'm going to explain why you all should too. Bats are incredibly diverse. Did you know that they make up 25% of all mammal species in the world? Most bats are insect-eating bats. However, there's a few that have changed gears and become fruit-eating bats, and even fewer that have become the blood-eating bats. My study focuses on the nasal cavity development of fetal bats. This is something that really hasn't been done before, and it's quite interesting because we can see development shaped from the earliest signs of life. I start by sourcing CT scans like the ones we see above, and I trace the nasal cavities, and I go frame by frame by frame until the culmination of that becomes a 3D model, which is shown below. Now, this 3D model contains a plethora of information, such as surface area, volume, and cavity count, which can be used for phylogenetic analysis to examine dietary groups. So what is my research question? I am looking at how dietary specialization affects sensory organs. The answer, I think, might be right under their nose. I hypothesize that fruit-eating bats who use their sense of smell to pick up fruit aromas will have a more complex nasal structure than insect-eating bats who use their ears for echolocation. And these will compare vastly to blood-eating bats who use their sensory organs in completely unique ways. But why does this really matter? I recently had the opportunity to do some field work in Western North Carolina, where I saw firsthand the effect of white nose syndrome. This is a fungus that has wiped out nearly 90% of insect-eating bats in the past decade. That means more pests in the crops that we eat are directly being affected. Luckily, amongst this chaos, I saw juvenile bats. They were thriving, they were adapting, and they were overcoming these hurdles. By studying the nasal cavities, we not only learn how we can protect these bats, we can protect ourselves and make for a better future. Thank you.
Today, almost all of us have cell phones. And have you ever received a text message saying your USPS delivery was unsuccessful? Please click on this link to update your address. It seems routine. However, this is actually a fraud message with bad intention. At first, it's easy to ignore. However, these messages are actually working. According to Federal Trade Commission's report, last year, Americans lost over $470 million just to text scams. And this number is rising every year. And that brings us to the question, why so many people are still falling for these scams? For that, we did a nationwide survey with over 1,000 cell phone users where we asked them to spot fake versus real SMS. In result, we saw they could do that correctly about 52.6% of the time. That's basically a coin toss. And the result tells us even smart and cautious people can fall for the scams about half of the time. And it's not always about carelessness. There is something about human perception and design. And that brings us to the interview study with 29 cell phone users, where we wanted to find out the cues people look in the SMS while judging them as fraud or not. In result, we found that people look into the sender's information, the presence of link, and the context of the SMS. However, even the presence of red flags can be easily overridden because of timing and trust for the organization. In other words, the scam works not because it looks right, because it feels right. So, where do we go from here? Now, we are working on the design improvements, where we are working with better warning signs, message framing, and filters, using insights from color psychology and other visual insights. And our ultimate goal is to make a safer digital space where technology serves people, not preys on them. Thank you.
What do a grocery store, a hospital, and an amusement park all have in common? Each one is a place where you wait in line. Now, which line do you hope moves the fastest? I imagine many of us hope it's the one at the hospital. But how do we know what kind of setup and resources are going to give us the shortest wait time? Places like the grocery store and the amusement park may be able to find this answer through trial and error, but the hospital is not such a place. Hospitals need to have great practices that effectively handle the flow of patients. This is why, as a mathematician, I have devoted my research to studying the setup of lines and the allocation of resources within the healthcare system to find what keeps it running smoothly. So, using a strong mathematical theory, I can simulate a hospital, including its beds, patients, doctors, and nurses. I can also simulate random events such as a patient has been admitted to the hospital or one of our doctors has fallen ill. With this healthcare model, I can track all sorts of data to answer questions like, do we have enough beds and providers right now? I can also incorporate the mathematical theory behind predicting epidemic waves like COVID-19 to simulate even more sick people going to the hospital. With this, we can additionally answer questions like how many of our providers are becoming sick from the infected patients? Or even better yet, should we be investing in more beds or more providers in the coming future? So with this powerful but flexible tool, healthcare administrators and public health policy makers can look at all of the different what-ifs of a situation. So after running my model for almost 2.5 million simulations, I have carefully orchestrated all of those intense recommendations for any given scenario. So how could this be used? Well, as we have an upcoming influenza season, our hospitals could use this tool to see what the projected resources they are going to need in order to ensure that no one has to wait for treatment. So what is most important to the healthcare industry is ensuring that we have the best practices that ensure that no one has to wait for treatment, but we can also alleviate the strain on our healthcare system. And now these resources and these best practices can be found in the time it takes you to check out at the grocery store. Thank you.
Drug addiction, drug overdosing death, or drug trafficking. It's been everyday news for us right now, right? What if I told you I can name several drugs out there in the street you can find is very tiny bit is lethal for human body. What does lethal mean? Lethal means a substance can cause death. For example, fentanyl. Let's just think like how deadly and what is the lethal dose for fentanyl. Let's think you have fentanyl powder in your one hand and you have a pencil tip. So you are trying to scoop out some of the fentanyl powder with your pencil tip. How much you'll get? Any guess? I'll take the answer from audience. Any guess? It will be in milligram. Any guess?
5 milligrams.
Okay, I'll take the answer. Hardly 2 milligram. So that 2 milligram fentanyl is basically lethal for human body. That means that fentanyl can cause death. So here comes the twist. You'll not find fentanyl in the street as a direct drug. Fentanyl is being laced with other known drug, like cocaine, heroin, or methamphetamine. If you have ever watched Breaking Bad, you know what I'm talking about. So here comes the twist. So those drugs with fentanyl get laced and sell in the street. And people are taking it, they are getting overdosed, they are dying. So here comes the twist again, like how we can test those drugs and figure out what is in the mixture. So we do have some of the testing strip in the departmental store or in the pharmacy you can find. You can use those strips to test out and figure out what the drug is there. But the problem with those strips is they are designed to find out a single drug at the same time. For example, if you have 5 different drugs, you have to use 5 different strips. So if you have a mixture, you're screwed there. You don't know what to do with that. It's going to give either single positive for one drug and it's going to be hidden the another drug. So here come research. In my research, I'm using a chemical testing pattern where we're using this testing pattern and mix with the drugs and giving what possible drug you might have. And with this testing pattern, you can figure out how many drug you have, how many drug mixture you have, and possibly what are the mixture. And here is the things, here is the goal is to not to help people take more drugs, but to risk reduction. That means that easily we can find out what is hidden there, and easily and more effectively we can figure out and we can take any tragical death removal and also can save more lives. Thank you.
Pick the blue pill, the story ends. Pick the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Pick your pill, make your choice, choose your reality. An estimated 100 million people currently fight a substance addiction across the United States of America. But why ask, why do people choose to use substances? As somebody who's been clean from methamphetamine for 3 years now, I can tell you why. Because I do not like my reality. But why did I choose methamphetamine? Why does anybody choose the substance that they choose? And why does this choice differ in communities, urban versus rural? Substance use is not a moral failure. Substance use is a choice of a consumer participating in an economic activity. All markets rely on supply and demand, and substance use is no different. Supply is accessibility, that's being sold, prescribed, and manufactured. Demand is reason, the psychological, cultural, and emotional factors that drive drugs of choice. And these supply and demand factors differ in communities, urban versus rural. Using 2018 NCDHHS and 2016 SAM-HSA data, both data sets coming from prior to 2020 to prevent any influence from the COVID-19 pandemic, I found that indeed these supply and demand factors differ in communities, urban versus rural, and indeed the supply and demand factors drive drugs of choice. Modeling all 100 North Carolina counties and performing a multivariate linear regression test, I found that there are 4 key supply and demand factors that show both substantive and statistical significance while continuously affecting the drugs of choice. Party culture supports methamphetamine and psychostimulant use. The blue-collar workforce and the gay male population support methamphetamine, stimulant, and psychostimulant use. The white population supports methamphetamine and psychostimulant use, while the non-white population supports stimulant and cocaine use. This research reframes substance abuse not as an issue of place, but of pressure, economic, social, and emotional. If we understand substance use as a market, then we can design better policies. Policies that stabilize supply and address demand by providing increased mental health support, community outreach, belonging, and development, as well as addressing systematic barriers. Policies that address specific issues of specific communities in their urban or rural settings. So whether you pick the blue pill or the red pill, one truth remains. Addiction is not about the drug, it's about the world that makes that drug desirable in the first place. Thank you very much.
When I started my PhD journey at the age of 59, I wanted to be transformational. I did not want to be called Dr. Feels Good because I want to make a difference for society. And so I drew upon my 28-year U.S. Army tenure as an officer. I saw so many people leave the military and it was sad and upset. I said, look, you're getting a 20-year letter, you're getting paid immediately for the rest of your life. What's wrong with you? What I discovered is that we have what we call the Transition Assistance Program, also called TAP. TAP is responsible for ensuring that soldiers are able to transition from being in the uniform, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, even Space Force, into the civilian sector. The problem with the TAP is only for 1 year, and that's not enough time for a soldier to be able to transition from a social standpoint, from a cognitive standpoint, which I mentioned later. And so what we want to do, I said what I want to do, is I want to put the Transition Assistance Program on an ERP platform. ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning. ERP allows you to have an ecosystem that's fully integrated, That is, I want to have the soldiers that are in the military communicate with veterans who already transitioned, as well as look at workforce development. If they want to, what I call the corridors of tomorrow, they have 3 choices. Become a business owner, we know how that can work. Become a student in academia, or be an employee as a company. A lot of companies are not ready for that soldier when they transition. And so what I want to do is make sure that it's an iterative process. As my wife would say, begin with the end in mind. When you administer the oath of office, which I had my share of doing that, the oath of office had 2 words in it, support and protect. We have to make sure we support and protect those soldiers when they come out of the military, so they're not stressed, dealing with PTSD. Speaking of PTSD, PTSD was 54,000 soldiers in FY, the military got hit FY 2013. It ballooned to FY 2025 as 5 million. That's astronomical. However, the VA is only approving 6% of those soldiers. And so I'm hoping that I can make a difference as far as transition assistance program, but at a curveball, cognitive resilience. We're always designing systems, and we think, what's wrong with the user? Why didn't we understand it? Because the cognitive dimension. The military is catching up on the cognitive aspect, but I got to make sure when I design the system, I look at the cognitive aspect of it. I also want to leave you with this. One of my favorite quotes was BASF. We do not make the research that you analyze, synthesize, critique, and dispute. What we do is make the research better. So thank you for your time, and have a happy research.
Imagine walking into a classroom where you're told only English here. You want to speak, but your mind is translating, comparing sounds, searching for meaning. Now, imagine a different classroom where your teacher says, use both English and Spanish to build your voice. Which one would help you speak with confidence? That question shaped my research. Because for many adult English learners, their first language isn't a barrier. It's a bridge. As a multilingual educator, I know exactly how it feels to struggle to find words in another language. That fear of being judged. That silence that follows when you want to speak but can't find your sound. Most of my students are adult immigrants who carry heavy stories of starting over, of needing English to find a job, to belong, to live a normal human life. Hearing their struggles made me determined to find an easier, faster, and kinder way for them to acquire English. So, I designed the study with 2 groups of adult Spanish-speaking learners. One taught only English, another used translanguaging, a bilingual approach, where Spanish supports English learning. In the translanguaging class, I used Spanish to explain tricky English sounds, like the difference between ship and sheep. I encourage my students to compare grammar, translate meaning, and make sense of English through Spanish. Then, I measured 3 things: pronunciation accuracy, cognitive flexibility, and learner confidence. The results were powerful. Students who used both languages pronounced words more clearly, remember pattern faster, and felt more confident in speaking English, not only in the classroom, but even at their work and community. By connecting what they already knew in Spanish, they unlocked what they could do in English. This isn't just about language. It's about dignity and identity. When learners are allowed to bring their whole selves into the classroom, their brains work smarter. Their heart felt seen. They stop saying I can't and start saying I can in both languages. So, next time anyone asks you, how could we help adults speak better English? The answer is simple. Let them bring all their language to the class. Thank you.
Seizures are what most people think about when they hear the word epilepsy. But for most kids, seizures actually aren't the hardest part. It's everything else. The stress, the stigma, the silence. Epilepsy is one of the most common neurological conditions among children. And yet, the care that these kids receive often focuses solely on seizure control. So what's missing? The mental health care. Children with epilepsy experience so much more than just seizures alone. They also deal with things like anxiety, depression. They miss school events, avoid activities, and in general, just struggle to keep up. Medication side effects can make all of this even worse. Children with epilepsy also experience so much more. So, to test this question, I asked, focusing on two main experiences. First, the physical symptoms, or medication side effects. Second, their emotional symptoms, otherwise known as internalizing problems. When we ran the analysis, two main things stood out. First, internalizing symptoms were the strongest predictor of poor quality of life. This means that when a child experienced more internalizing symptoms, the worse their quality of life was. Second, medication side effects also mattered, but to a lesser degree. This tells us something important. Focusing on seizure control alone for epilepsy is simply not enough. We have to consider the emotional side too. My hope is that this work would encourage healthcare providers to consider the emotional side of epilepsy just as strongly as they consider the physical side. Thank you.
Let's have a hand of applause for all of our candidates. You all did such a magnificent job. I'm glad I'm not a judge. But all of you are judges because it's time for you to vote for the People's Choice Award. While you do that, I'm going to ask all of the judges to step out with me. We will tabulate the scores. You will hear from our dean, and then we'll be back with the results.
While the judges are doing their work, I've been asked to talk, I guess, on your entertainment, which was a mistake. But the first thing I want to do is I want to thank all of our competitors and congratulate them. It is humbling to see the amazing things that you're doing. Truly outstanding. We're excited not just for who you are today, but after seeing what you're working on, who you're going to become, and the work you're going to do, and you represent us so well. We know that there were dozens of others who also participated in this competition, and they're doing exciting work as well. So, congratulations. You heard Jill speak about the importance of 3MP, and I see some of my students have been in the room. If we can't communicate about our research, then it's not going to have the impact that it should. And everyone here who does research knows that peer review is the foundation of the work we do. It is how we validate our work in the community. And so being able to communicate in a 3MT setting, but also to your colleagues that you might be walking to your cars together, how do you convey that work in such a short amount of time is quite a challenge. So congratulations to you. I want to thank Raju and the Raju Law, the support that you provided these last few years has just been truly outstanding. It makes this such an exciting event, and it incentivizes our students to engage and participate. We really appreciate it. And this is not all that you're doing. What I understand is you're running workshops to help our international students deal with immigration issues. Your Chelsea Smith, one of your colleagues, is also helping with communication. And you brought Kate, one of your other colleagues, here today, so thank you for joining us. The superhero competition that you do, yes. This is really supporting our students and identifying someone that goes above and beyond in helping their fellow lab mate or classmate in graduate studies and doing research. And then the Niner Nation Gives, you do a match for that. There's just so many things that they're doing, and we are truly appreciative of all of your support. When the judges come back in, I'll wait for them to come back in, so I want to thank them as well. But if you haven't noticed, and many probably have who have been here, I've been here since 1996, but Dean Emeritus Tom Reynolds is here. He was a part of starting all of this. Was it 10 years ago that we started? I think Catherine mentioned, and so thank you for joining us today, if we could acknowledge. And the last thing that I will say is that this is just the beginning for what our students are doing. This kind of engagement and the stories that you're telling, these are stories that are just not fictional stories. These are stories that are changing people's lives. And you get to be a part of that. It is a meaningful thing that you're doing, not just the research you present today, but the research that you're going to be doing forward as you move forward. And I hope that we don't forget that. Because so often we get caught up in, well, how's my student doing it? Are they going to graduate? Are they going to get this paper done? But every paper, while that's important, we're talking about the impact that we're having on society and the meaningful contributions. So I hope that doesn't get lost in the pressure of these kinds of events. Last year, you may have heard Jill mention, well, I've done this and I understand just how difficult it is. She gave a wonderful 3-minute thesis about doing the 3-minute thesis last year, and I was sweating through that. And I know that I can't do it. People who know me know that I'm an introvert, so I'm having to force myself right now to be your entertainer. And I'm looking over, are they back yet? Are they back yet? So thank you all for coming out and providing the support. These are your lab mates, your classmates, your friends, your family, and your support for what they are doing. This is some of the most difficult things you've done probably in your life from an academic standpoint. I know how difficult it was for me to make it through my studies. And the thing that I've learned today is I've learned a lot, first of all, but I know so little based on seeing all the work they're doing, and it makes me excited to continue to learn. And I hope you never lose that, and I hope we don't lose that either. So, I wish they would hurry. This was the wrong person to be entertaining all of you. One of the things I do like is just the variety of the research. And last year I saw this as well. Last year's winner, Melissa?
Lauren.
Sorry. Raise your hand in the back and say, and she did a fabulous job.